Now I need a little bit of code to actually interact with this. I've created a little console application of my solution, and the application has references to my data layer, to my domain classes, and also to the Entity Framework assembly from Entity Framework 4.1. And I have here a little bit of code that will create a new blog, spin up a new context that we created in the data layer, add that blog, and then go ahead and save that to the database. But I don't have a database yet. I'll depend on Code_First's default behavior to create the database for me and use the structure of the classes that my data layer exposes. That's the blogs class and the posts. So it will look in here to discover what the structure is and create database schema from that. Now I have a breakpoint here because I want you to see the difference between the impact of instantiating the context and actually saving the data into the database. I'll go ahead and run this, and it'll stop at the breakpoint. Now, before I look for the database, I want to point out that the namespace for the context is pluralsight.datalayer, and then the class name is context. And because I haven't specified a database in a connection string, Entity Framework will use the strongly typed name of this context to create the database. So let's take a look at SQL Server Management Studio. And my database will fall right in here because it's alphabetical. And I'll refresh it, and there's the database. Now let's open this up, and you can see that I have a blogs table based on my blog class and a posts table. Expand this to see the columns. There are the properties that I specified, and notice that it automatically made ID the primary key because it matched its assumption, its convention, that a property named ID will become an identity key and therefore a primary key in the database table. So if we take a look at posts, we'll find the same. There's ID, which is primary key, and look, it automatically created this foreign key for me, blog_ID. So it saw that I had defined a relationship between blog and posts, but I didn't specify a foreign key, so it built the foreign key based on the name of the class, blog, and the primary key of the blog class, ID, and it also built a primary foreign key relationship between the two tables. So Code_First did all of that for me by default. Now I'll just run through the rest of this code, which adds the new blog that I created into the blogs DB set of my context. And then I call save changes, which will go ahead and insert that blog into the database table. So let's look back at the database again. And I'll open up the blogs table. And you can see there's the data that I just inserted with the title EF41blog and the blogger name. Now I've created a new method called addPost. The first thing I'll do in addPost is retrieve the blog that I just entered, and I know that the primary key of that blog is 1. I'm using a handy method that DB Context provides called find, which will search whatever property happens to be the primary key property for whatever value I pass in. So all I have to do is say find and pass in the value 1. Entity Framework will know that I mean to look for the blog whose ID value is 1. It will go ahead and execute that query for me and return the blog. Now that I have the blog from the database in memory, I can go ahead and add a new post to it. So here's a new post with a title, my first post, and a little bit of content, and then I'll call save changes. Now I had to add a little bit of code to my blog class so that when I try to work with a posts property, it already exists. So just in the constructor of the blog, I'm instantiating the posts property to a new list of posts. So now I can go ahead and run my addPost method, and we'll just let that run through and take a look at the database when it's all done. And now we'll take a look at what's inside of the post table. And there it is, my first post. It was assigned an ID. It's got the title and the content, and automatically Entity Framework knew to put the value 1 into the foreign key for blog ID. So if you think about the fact that all I've got here is my domain classes that I've described, they're as simple as I want them to be for my domain. They know nothing about Entity Framework or their data layer. And then a very simple data layer that does nothing more at this point than create DB set wrappers around my blog class and my post class. And I get all of this behavior for free, even the creation of a database.